Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. So we want to remind you guys to join us, sign on, and share. We are here sharing wealth through health. So I know you guys are going to probably ask me, where's Dr. Pete and where's Dr. Maya? Just want to give you some updates. Dr. Pete is on his way, and Dr. Maya is actually on her way to the emergency room with her
Mm,
doggie. Her
mm.
doggie has had some type of allergic reaction to something, and her whole little face and tongue is swollen, and she can't breathe well. So they're on their way to the emergency room. But she told us that she was going to keep us posted. So we will definitely be praying for little Alpha, who is her pit bull. Her pit bull's name is Alpha. We'll be praying for Alpha. I see Linda Johnson has chimed on in. Linda Johnson is here. So remember to share, share. Stop texting me and share. Just come on in and join us. As usually, we're going to go around the table. We're going to do our introductions to the guy who is known for being a world-renowned urologist, the one who keeps all the men healthy, who has since retired, but that's no such thing. That's our very own Dr. Terry Mason. Dr. Mason,
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Couch Conversations with the Doctors. I want to thank again our distinguished congressman who makes this venue possible every week, along with the help of Ms. Nicole Harvey. So I'm glad to join my esteemed colleagues here, and we hope to impart to you some information that might just help you improve the quality of your life.
Mm. Yeah.
all right. Thank you so very much. Thank you so much. And to the man who said that I threatened him to be here every Monday, but he is always here and he is on time. The doctor who is a farmer. Let's say hey to Dr. James Miller.
Good evening, everybody. Well, farmers produce the food, so you gotta eat. Otherwise, you're not gonna stay on this earth very long. So, but just want to say good evening to everybody, and we are so happy to be here. Want to thank the Congressman Davis and Nikki for having this forum and allowing us to partake in it. And hopefully, we can say something and answer some questions, and maybe do some say some things that will help to answer some of the issues that are causing illness in our community, to try to resolve some of these issues. Because even though I don't practice clinical medicine anymore, I'm still in the healing business, and it is important to help to get our community healed and as well as possible. So glad to be here and hope that you all enjoy tonight.
Wonderful. To the guy who has joined us with a skull cap on, but of course that skull cap has to be gold. To the guy who is he is a chef extraordinaire for his daughters in his home. That's our very own Dr. Pete Thomas. Dr. Pete.
Nikki, I thought somebody was sabotaging me over here. My computer was going crazy. I said, well, you know what? I still have a cell phone. I said, the devil is a lie.
He
And,
sure
and what the
is.
old folks say, and the truth ain't in them.
There you go.
No, I'm happy to be here. I am looking forward to hearing my brother really expound on some of the most recent scientific data that confirms what we already knew, right? And what we were already telling our patients and helping our patients to understand. And Dr. Hampton, I was thinking about John Snow, the father of public health, who had to pull the pump. And he didn't have a consensus statement to go on. He had to do what was necessary to keep the cholera epidemic that was in England back in the early 1700s. So he had to pull that pump, knowing good and well that it would piss off a lot of people. But he did what was necessary to help the people. And so the fact that the data has come out much later than we knew, that's okay. We were already ahead of the game and helping our
Pardon?
community. I'm looking forward to it, Doc.
Oh, I don't have to take it off. Okay. Yeah. Mm, yeah.
Okay, I want to say hey to Linda Johnson, who's here. She's saying good evening, everyone. She is also laughing at us. I want to say hey to Audrey Jaycox, who has joined us just as well. I see people are joining us. Make sure that you share, and continue to share. Because the man who makes all of this possible, our special guest as always on every Monday night, the man who truly teaches us that health is wealth, and that's our very own Congressman, Danny K. Davis.
Well, let me just say that, I saw Audrey Jaycock yesterday, as a matter of fact, out in Proviso Township, where she lived, and it's always a pleasure. And it's always good. I was thinking, and one of the reasons that I am wearing my mask, of course, the governor was at this event that we were having, and we've all been thankful to the director of our Department of Public Health for the state of Illinois, who has done an outstanding job in her role. One of my staffers informed me this morning that he was going to be wearing black and gold pretty soon. And so it was good to see that Gerard is going through the induction period. It's not hazing anymore. We don't believe in much of that. As a matter of fact, I met with the National Fraternity Pact last week with the executive committee of it. And we had a great conversation because they were talking about supporting things to build dormitories for young people going to college and eliminating some of the negative aspects of fraternal life. And it was just a great meeting. I'm looking forward to the discussion because it does seem like, and I said to the governor yesterday, that I appreciated his leadership because Illinois has been doing better than a lot of states relative to the pandemic.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, Illinois has been doing better than a lot of states in many ways, and always has been and is a decent and good place in which to live, especially when I think of what we do with health and medicine, and especially, I mean, when you compare it with a lot of other places, and you're always making comparisons. A lot of good stuff started in England, including a lot of good stuff in health, but I was also thinking social work.
Mm.
They did a lot of stuff with prisoners built Pennsylvania. A lot of folks don't know that. That the folks who built Pennsylvania were let out of prison. They had debtors' prison, where if you didn't pay your bill, they'd lock you up. And this guy Oglethorpe convinced the Queen to let him do something with him. And I guess it was the beginning of reentry because she gave him a grant and he founded Pennsylvania and brought these people to the United States. But there is so much good stuff that Illinois is a part of. So it's just good to be part of the show. And let's go.
All right, I see that my coworker has joined us, Dr. Douglas Graham. Doug, if you can introduce yourself really quickly. Doug, you're muted.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm a retired physician. I spent 30 years working in the western suburbs of Chicago and 2 years working in the congressman's office. And I think it's a real honor and pleasure to be here and work with my colleagues. And I'm going to try and answer your questions the best as I can.
Outstanding. So I'm going to ask at this time of Dr. Tony Hansen if he would start his presentation. Everybody sit back, relax, get your, no, don't get popcorn. Don't get your popcorn. Popcorn is a carb. Don't get the popcorn. Audrey Jacobs says, yes, I was wearing my mask yesterday, especially for the pictures. Laugh out loud, Congressman. Most of the part, most people had their mask on just as well. All right, go right ahead, Tony.
All right. Well, it's really exciting to have an opportunity to talk about some good news and share that good news, because it's really important that we celebrate these moments. And a lot of times they just come so rarely. So I want to definitely thank the congressman just for having this platform, and everybody that participates, because we get a chance to learn a lot from each other. And I really appreciate that. So I want to say that out loud. Hopefully my slides will pop up in a second. It seems to be going a little slow, but what I want to do today is talk a little bit about some good news, and the reason why it's so important is because can you guys see the screen?
Not yet.
Okay, I'll get it straight in a second. So I think that the sharing feature was halted, but I'll keep going. So what it is we have this platform where we have folk of, different experiences, and it's really important that as we think about our, similarities and differences, that we base our decisions on how we function based on science. Is it visible now?
It's got the advertisement.
Yes, Couch Conversations, right? Right, your title slide is up.
Okay, good. So again, that's honoring you, Congressman, and again, all those who are part of this team. But this discussion is really an interesting one, because, and maybe everybody should mute themselves, but this is an interesting discussion because it really allows us to ask this question, right? And this is a question we've been asking for a while. And I think this presentation will help provide some clarity. And I think it's important that we provide that clarity. And it's a very good format, because we have two people on this platform in particular. It's myself and Dr. Mason, who have perspectives. So if you look at Dr. Mason's perspective, and I love this quote from Forks Over Knives, and he's really been a leader in the space as relates to plant-based nutrition. And this is what he said. He says, if it walked, if it hopped, if it swam, crawled, slittered, had eyes, a mama and a dad, don't eat it. And so that's what Dr. Terry Mason, and obviously as a former commissioner of health in the city of Chicago, had a very important role in spreading the message of nutrition. And there's an irony to this for me, is because if I read that exact same statement, I would probably say, if it does all of those things he just said, I would say, eat it. So what do you do when you have two people that you may admire and respect with different perspectives? In fact, he was in that documentary, and guess what? I was in a completely different one that suggested that some of the plant-based burgers can be harmful because of some of the ingredients they have. So you have completely different perspectives. Although I will say this, plant-based burgers are okay. It's just that this particular one had something in it called leg hemoglobin. And when they did the research for that, they found that it was only in mice, and it was only for 28 days. And so the jury is out if that's okay or not, even though it's from a soy product, the root of the soy. So I just want to provide that context, but I have a spoiler alert. So if anybody was kind of thinking it was like a low carb versus low fat. This is not what this is all about. And that's because both approaches can improve your metabolic health. So that's the good news. So as you think about the information I'm sharing, I want you to think about the fact that you got to think about what's best for you, but you don't have to choose one or the other. So let's talk about why I decided to take a moment to come before you guys with some slides. And that's because the American Heart Association put out a scientific statement on March the 1st. And they do this periodically because these organizations have an important role in guiding us and helping us know what our dietary choices should be. Most of your doctors are busy just being doctors, the pharmacists, the nutrition professionals. So we need guidance, and doctors tend to follow the guidance of these organizations. So let's see this is the abstract, and we'll make sure to have, I think I already have links in the notes to this presentation, rather it's on Facebook or YouTube. So one thing I like about this statement is that they had the first figure they showed that they were concerned about health equity across populations. That's huge, because if you don't deal with health equity, you're going to have a population, particularly the underserved and communities of color, who are not going to benefit from all the things that this type of recommendation would have. And at the bottom, if you notice, they include social determinants of health. And as you know, dealing with the economics, dealing with the access to care, the education, if those things are not in place, a lot of communities of color are going to struggle. And of course, they go into the importance of managing with drugs, managing diabetes with lifestyle. Of course, myself and particularly Dr. Mason are very concerned about lifestyle, and I think we all are. So let's look at what was in this particular document that was breathtaking and kind of a happy moment for me, because I've been standing on a mountain for a long time saying that this low carb thing is okay, keto is okay, but people have been so nervous about it that they have not embraced it, particularly my colleagues who follow the recommendations of dietary guidelines, right? So as you can see where the arrow is pointed, Mediterranean, we already knew that was, regarded as good. Paleolithic, which moves towards what I recommend. And as you can see, they say low carb is one of the diets they recommend. They also say high protein won't hurt you. And of course, the vegetarian diet, and then diets that have a lot of nuts. Those types of diets, they're saying, are okay to consider as you think about which diet is best for you. So that was groundbreaking, because for the last, I would argue, 30, 40 years, maybe even 50 years, it's been fat is bad. And we know a low carb diet has more fat in it than, these other types of diets. So that's a big shift for them. And I'll explain why I think they went in that direction in a moment. If you look at this slide, it says something that's very interesting. It says, for those who are unable to adhere to a calorie restricted diet, you always hear this calories in, calories out, eat less, move more. Sometimes that's hard to do. You're always hungry. But they're saying if you can't do that, a low carb diet reduces the A1C, that's the diabetes test, and the triglycerides, which are the fats. And in fact, when I see patients in clinic, I actually measure their triglycerides to know if they're actually following a low carb diet. They also say a very low carb diet. Now, you know what that's code for keto, right? A very low carb diet was effective at reducing the A1C over shorter periods of time, which is logical because you're eating less carbs and there's no need for the blood sugar to go up. And they're saying for individuals using a very low carb dietary approach, it's important for healthcare professionals to maintain, a tight watch on those diets and prevent hypoglycemia. And so they pointed out, of all the diets they pointed out that keto diet is the one you have to worry about the most for low sugars, because it's the most effective. Because it's gonna drop your sugars, because again, diabetes is a carbohydrate intolerance. So if you remove the thing that's causing the problem, of course your blood sugars are gonna drop. So again, this is groundbreaking news, because they finally realized that that this diet was effective. Now you look at obesity and weight management, and they're just saying that, you really want to understand that obesity is associated with adverse cardiovascular outcomes. In other words, if you are obese, your chance of having a heart attack or a stroke is greater. So that's just important to realize. And even the U.S. News and World Report suggested that the low-carb diet, they use Atkins as an example, is the most effective weight loss diet, although they did say Mediterranean and some of the other diets were better for heart health. So I want to point out this summary statement. It says a patient-centered approach in this context means reframing our clinical encounters to think about patients as people who live in families, communities, and societies and must be considered as we think about their risk factors. In other words, don't treat the numbers, treat the person. If a person is struggling with a relationship issue, you got to deal with the relationship. If they're emotional, I had a patient, one of my last patients today had lost her husband. There's no time to talk about keto and low carb if she just lost her husband. I got to deal with that first, and then we can talk about the lifestyle. So if you look at this statement, now we're leaving the American Heart Association and reminding you that they're not the only organization that's saying fat is not harmful. The Journal of the College of Cardiology has put out a statement in June of 2020 saying that there's no need to limit saturated fat. And I'll explain why that's true in a moment. But the bottom line is, even though this evidence is out there, and these are based on randomized controlled trials primarily, people have not gotten the memo. So that's why there's a big kind of back and forth, and why when you see one study on the news that says eat the steak, and then another study says don't eat the steak, there's a lot of confusion. That's primarily driven by the types of studies that are making the reports. Another reminder, why did the American Diabetes decide low carb was okay? Well, their founder, Tracy Brown, not their founder, but their CEO, their previous CEO, in this podcast, shared with the world that she got off of her insulin and all of her medicines except for metformin by doing this dietary approach. And this is the eating patterns that you'll see from the American Diabetes Association. And thankfully, they also include the same diets, Mediterranean, vegetarian, and vegan, but now they have low carb and very low carb. This happened at the end of 2019. Before that, even the American Diabetes Association was nervous about low carb. And of course, very low carb is keto. And of course, the DASH diet, we think about hypertension with that, and then paleo. So very similar to the American Heart Association. But again, you have the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, the Journal of College of Cardiology. And finally, if you look at this, and this was the first one to make a move, 2016, the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists. As you know, an endocrinologist is a diabetes specialist. And if you look at their meal plans that they say are okay, you see Mediterranean, DASH, low carb, low fat, volumetric, high protein, and vegetarian. So now you have really the most important organizations out there saying that it's okay to eat this dietary pattern. Now, I put this slide here briefly to remind you of why we're in this mess we're in now. And that's because the previous studies that were done were what we call observational studies, cohorts, case control, cross-sectional case reports. But these studies are almost like, some of them are done with surveys sent to people's homes. Some of them are done by looking at a group of patients, and they just follow them. They don't control for things. They don't always ask, were they smokers, drinkers, do they exercise? And because of that, the quality of those studies were not as good. And that's where most nutritional studies were. It's very hard to pay for studies where you tell people what to eat, you give them what to eat, and it's very hard to do that. But when you get to the level of randomized controlled trials, that's when you have the highest level of evidence. And that's why in the past, they didn't say low carb was okay, because they didn't have enough evidence. But really since 2003 or so, we started getting that research done by people like Dr. Eric Westman, et cetera. So if you go to the next slide, you'll understand maybe why they're okay with this now. So if you look at this slide, as you know, if you look at the bottom, it says, well, if in terms of substantially greater weight loss, when you compare low carb to low fat, it's 36-0. In other words, there's no low fat studies that show greater weight loss than a low carb diet. And that's probably because carbohydrates is what gets turns into fat in your body. So if you reduce the carbs, you're going to lose weight. And then in terms of greater weight loss, it's 58 to 7. But keep in mind, these are the highest level of quality. These are the randomized controlled trials. They're not these other types of studies. So if you're going to trust a study, you're going to trust the ones at the highest level of evidence. So I just wanted to put that out there. So this is probably why they finally decided to make this decision. You know, I wrote my book, Fix Your Diet, Fix Your Diabetes in 2017. So I got the memo a while, you know, ways back. So I think they struggled to make these changes, but I'm just happy they finally did. So in summary, what we've reviewed very quickly is that both the low carb and low fat diets actually treat diabetes. And if you go back to this slide, in every study that compared these two diets, both diets made you healthier. What did not make you healthier is staying on the standard American diet. So if you eat processed food and you're eating, you know, takeouts all the time, you're going to struggle. But if you eat quality whole foods, whether it's low carb or low fat, you're going to be fine. So we learned about the different organizations that now endorse low carb, and we have adequate science to support these ways of eating. So what resources can you go to? Because I didn't want to make this a long presentation. I just want to make sure you got the memo. And then here's the resources. The first thing is, you know, you can go to my link tree. So that little website up there. And with that, you can look at the information. For example, if you want to do low carb, well, here's a video to show you how to do it. If you want to learn as a clinician how to do this safely, you can click on that and read the therapeutic guidelines. So I put this here as a resource. So this is recorded, so you can come back to that. Here's a video that you're going to watch. It's a 44-minute video. It's just to help people walk them through that process. Here's the handouts that show you what you should eat, what you should avoid. Again, this is low carb, not low fat. So if you decide to do low fat, you'll have to follow, you know, you have to kind of eliminate that protein portion. Pretty much everything else will be similar, because even a low fat diet that has too much starch, you're still going to be overweight or have problems with diabetes. And here are the things to avoid. Things now, if you notice, what's up with fruit? Isn't fruit good for me? Well, if it's too, you know, a banana has 28 carbs, and 28 divided by 4 is 7 teaspoons of sugar. So I'm not sure a diabetic should be eating bananas and pineapples, you know, for breakfast. I think that they're better off going back to the berry section and eating berries. I think that's a better way to go for a diabetic, and they should even restrict that. And you even, because berries will eventually turn into sugar. And guess what? Even the nuts and seeds, who can walk by a barrel of peanuts and not come back a second or third? And every time you grab a handful of peanuts, you're grabbing about 6 carbs. Over the course of a day, that could easily exceed what your goals are. So protein, non-starchy vegetables, healthy fats, that's the way to go to be healthy. And of course, the rice, pasta, potatoes, corn, bread, those things to be avoided. So this is just sharing that link to the guidelines that show us how to therapeutically deal with this carbohydrate issue. I did want to put, you know, really honoring Dr. Mason, Dean Ornish. It is true that the research he did absolutely was the only research that showed regression of plaques in our coronary arteries. So we want to honor that. So if you're leaning more towards a low fat approach, I want you to learn a little bit about the work he's doing. Of course, it's not just about diet with Dr. Ornish. It's about, you know, meditation, stress reduction, things like that, exercise as well. And of course, here's the abstract that Dr. Ornish published that shared the fact that you can change your heart health with lifestyle. So I just put that in there so you guys will see it. I'm doing a podcast for Friday with the very talented A-Day Fox. She's called The Black Carnivore, and she has a video. So I'll have a link to her video also in the show notes so that you'll be able to watch her 10-minute where she celebrates this as well. Some of you guys know Dr. Kim Berry. He was how I found out about this a couple of days ago. He put this video out, and he's a little bit more dramatic, as you can see from the title. But at the end of the day, he spoke truth to power, and he wanted to celebrate that. And then I want you to learn about Nina Teicholz. She wrote the book. She's a journalist. I think she'll be legendary. She wrote a book called The Big Fat Surprise. What's the surprise? Well, butter, meat, and cheese may not be as bad as you think. This is based on, if you guys remember in Chicago, Walter Jacobson, she's an investigative reporter. She was like, man, look at these studies. These are horrible studies. How can we make these nutritional recommendations based on those studies that were observational? And that's when she was able to show that the correlation between fat and what you eat wasn't that bad. And so there's a video that I'll have in the link where you can listen to her talk about this with the Cato Institute. And of course, I did a podcast with her where we talked about this subject as well. She's legendary. Another legendary person in my mind is Gary Tobbs. He wrote a book called Good Calories, Bad Calories. And he also suggested that this, eat less, move more methodology is false. And you already know it's true, because if I say, well, calories are the same, no, they're not. 100 calories of cake is not the same as 100 calories of spinach. We already know that. So to suggest you just have to count calories and that's it, that fails on its face. So Gary Tobbs wrote this book, and of course I had a chance to speak to him. So there will be a link so you can at least hear what he has to say. He has a new book out now, The Case for Keto, and that way you can check that out as well. So what I want you to do, and that's why this last slide is here, I want you to listen to your body. I want you to first know that low carb and low fat work, but you need to listen to your body. When I do a low fat diet, I was a vegetarian for 8 years. What I found is that I struggled to, with things like, gas and things like that. And it just wasn't perfect for me. So what you have to do is kind of find what works for you. And that way you'll find a diet that's best for you. And I think if you take that approach, you'll do just fine. I just think that at the end of the day, I think that everybody has to do what's best for them. The purpose of this presentation was to provide cover for those who have been confused, is to provide cover for those who are maybe try a different approach and they can't do it. And it gives you permission to do something that may heal you as well. So I think that's why I wanted to bring this to the conversation, and hopefully that provided some clarity. So I'll stop there. I know we want to at least hear some questions, get some feedback, and hopefully that was easy to digest. So thank you, Nikki.
Fantastic. Right before I get to that beautiful smile that's on Dr. Mason's face, I want to say hey to Lisa George. Lisa George is here, and she says good evening to everyone. Mary Ballinger is here, and she says good evening to everyone as well. And Audrey Jaycox has a question. She says, what about the use of berries in smoothies?
I'll just comment. When it comes to antioxidants, when it comes to phytonutrients, when it comes to anti-inflammatory, berries are the bomb, as they would say in the old neighborhood. The issue that you have to do, this goes back to what the last slide, you have to listen to your body, right? So if I am a diabetic and I make a smoothie, and I'm assuming you're not, I like coconut water, but I prefer water because coconut water has sugar in it, right? You can add your greens and things like that. So if you're going to do a smoothie, I prefer to be berries, frozen berries. However, you are breaking that berry up, right? So when you pre-digest something by breaking it up, when it comes to that sugar spike, it's going to probably be greater as opposed to you just eating berries. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what do you do to mitigate that spike? You add fat. So you add the avocado. Avocado don't even have a taste. It just makes it creamy. So you can add some, and avocado is probably the healthiest fruit on the planet. We call it a fruit because it's got a seed. You can add some coconut oil, things like that. So there's healthy fats that you can add. That's why I have that handout. And that's how you can mitigate that. So if you do that and your sugars don't spike, then it's okay. If your sugars do spike, I would find another alternative than to make a smoothie.
Fantastic. All right. Remember, all comments on the right side. Oh, go ahead, Pete. Go ahead, Dr. Pete.
No, I agree with Dr. Hampton, and I have my patients who swear by smoothies and don't understand that there's some smoothies that they can consume upwards of 1,800 calories in one drink and then turn right around and go and eat something. So it's the conventional wisdom is that because something has fruit in it, you make the assumption that it's healthy for you. And again, like Dr. Hampton said, that last slide, listen to your body. If you are someone who has a dysfunctional pancreas, who's not producing insulin at the rate that you should, that smoothie is not healthy for you. If I am an Olympic athlete and I'm swimming, you know, up and down a swimming pool, for 3.5 hours, maybe I can do a smoothie. So those are two different individuals. And so, we just want to make smart decisions in terms of, your health. So Dr. Hampton, I do have a question for you. And I want to know, is this fact or fiction that I did hear that in the 70s or maybe even earlier than that the sugar industries did sort of really accused or got on the whole anti-fat bandwagon in order to take the pressure off of them and their contribution to chronic disease and inflammation. Is that true? Was that true that the sugar industry said, oh yeah, watch out for the guys that's eating all the meat because that's where all the bad health is coming from? And meanwhile, they were dumping more and more sugar in foods that we consume on a daily basis.
I'll make it very simple. I mean, first of all, what would you do if your livelihood would jeopardize? I mean, it's most of the businesses that feed us are businesses first. So when they're being threatened, they will absolutely do what's necessary. What people don't understand is that nutritional policy is more political than it is science, right? So even the fruit and vegetables messaging, when they started that, the fruit part was not science-based at the time. It was really more of the fruit industry got together with the vegetable industry and they said, how do we make that a bigger industry? And so they and then, the research follows. And I'm not sitting here saying fruit's bad for you. I'm just saying it's more industry than it is anything else. So that's why you have to be very careful. So I think the short answer, I wish I could quote the exact moment when the sugar industry kind of went after the fat industry, but it absolutely was driven by money and sponsorship, and even some of the most respected organizations that we follow. And I'm not going to start naming them. You have to really ask yourself who's sponsoring the research that they're talking about. And if you see the soy industry or some industry sponsoring, and then you notice, oh, they're promoting something that's gonna make that industry do well. Then you have to start to pause and question that. So ultimately, the way I think about sugar, this is not really answering your question, but I think people should think about sugar as an example of a processed food. And our goal, myself, everybody on this panel, and especially Dr. Mason, our goal is eat real food. So if I see you sucking on a sugar cane, I'm less concerned than if you end up with that powder. The powder is no different than a drug. So the goal is eat the real stuff. If you want to suck on a sugar cane in your spare time, that's on you. I got some Southern folks sitting next to me. and actually my father-in-law who's sitting next to me, he would send my wife some sugar cane, and I would see her hit that sugar cane, and I'm not sure what's going on. Next thing you know, she's sucking on sugar cane. I'm a city boy. I didn't know what she was doing, but when you do that, that's not going to harm you. But when you consume that powder and you don't even know what's in your food, that fructose corn syrup, and all those sources of sugar in your food, and you're not even thinking about it, that's when it causes harm. So again, I try not to be too politicized when I'm on YouTube and doing things, but I think, you know, the writing is on the wall. And you have to look at sponsorship. And when you see sponsorship, you have to then at least say, oh, they may be biased. And if you can at least say that, then I'm okay with it. So that's how I would respond to that.
So we want to say hi to Travis, who's here, and also to Lorenzo Burton, who is here, and to the person who just sent an anonymous question. I think Dr. Pete answered that question for you, but I'll say it, and then I'm going to make sure I just follow up with Dr. Pete to make sure it was answered. The question is, in reference to fruit, is it not good for you when you're diabetic? And I think Dr. Pete said to you, listen to your body.
Yeah.
So in some of your question, you talked about when you have your smoothie in the morning, your vision becomes blurred. Then listen to your body. So I think that's what Dr. Pete was saying. I know he's moving around and he's muted, but if Dr. Miller or one of you all or Dr. Graham, he's unmuted. So that's correct, right? Listen to your body.
Yes.
That's what you said.
Yeah. And in general, you know, the marker that we follow is the hemoglobin A1C. And if you're noticing that there's a pattern of behavior, like your hemoglobin A1C is headed in the wrong direction, that means, you know, that number is going up. It's not below 7 anymore. Then you have to start looking and say, what am I doing that made that A1C start to creep up? And just, if you document your behavior, you'll say, oh, I stopped walking, or I started eating a smoothie because I saw that on a commercial, like Dr. Hampton was just saying. So it's just, you want to just start to notice things that you're doing. And, or it might be, oh, I'm stressed about the fact that my kid is sick, you know? So you want to pay attention to all those things, the lack of sleep, stress, a change in your eating behavior. Again, the random smoothie or the random picking up cookies on you know, Mrs. Jones's desk as you walk by on your break. All of those things contribute. So yeah.
All right, fantastic. Well, Dr. Mason, you had this gigantic smile on your face a little earlier, and I know you wanted to have some things to probably share and say. The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, let me thank my colleague Anthony, Dr. Anthony Hampton, for trying to put forth a balanced approach to looking at this dietary situation. And, you know, though in all honesty, I don't agree with everything, and that's okay, because that's why there's all kinds of journals and all kinds of everything. And but what I will say is that when you're eating food, whether it be vegetarian or not, if it's processed, you got a problem. And it doesn't matter what kind of meat it is or what kind of whatever it is, if it's processed, there's a problem. And what we really do need to move toward is eating more things in their more natural states. That's really, and that's hard to do. The other thing we have to look at is the other point that Dr. Hampton make, which I thought was excellent, is that we have to be clear about the influence of politics on our food policies, all the way from the way corn is so subsidized to all kinds of things, because you got to remember that there are many influences in our governmental system, and those influences speak with money, and they speak with other kinds of influence to guide policy that is not always in the best scientific interest of the population. So I would say that we need to look at these things and examine them for yourself. I had one time, and you know, one person doesn't make a study, and I think that what Dr. Hampton showed was the process by which we as scientists try and make a determination on the merits or not of a particular program or food. And food is very complex. You know, it's very complex. But I can say this much, that even when we start talking about sugars and what have you, if you eat an orange, that's different than drinking orange juice. That's a different kind of thing, because if you're eating the orange and you're eating the whole orange, not just squeezing it, but you're eating all the meat of the orange, you're getting fiber, which helps to negate the spike that you may get from drinking, that you get when you drink juice. So there's a lot that we could talk about, And Dr. Hampton, I really appreciate your attempt to have balance. I really appreciate that. And I thank you for the mentions, but there are things that we will have further conversation about. And the one thing that we don't have enough of, and the pilot study that we did at Trinity, is looking at these dietary patterns on our people. We don't have enough data about this. And we're looking now to raise about $1.2 million to do a study to really, really begin to answer this question in a very definitive way. And it's going to be a crossover study with, not just plant-based, but we're looking at some other dietary issues that we'll be doing crossovers on. So the jury is still out. I think that we still need to look at the one thing that is true, that we do need to watch fat. No matter what kind of diet you're eating, you do need to be careful about your fat, but you need to watch the sugar, and you need to watch everything that's processed. If you're eating it in a form that's not its natural state, then that's not good. It's just not good. And so we need to try and do more, because even the vegetables have fiber. I'd always hear low carb, but I consider what I eat low carb. I consider the way that I eat, which is a plant-based diet, it's low carb, because vegetables by definition are very low carbohydrates. So you only have to worry about it when you start using oils and butters and syrups and all kinds of other stuff. But that's about as low carb as you can get, almost, because there's nothing more calorie dense than a fat molecule.
And
So,
I like that, because I think that's most vegetables are not starchy.
that's right.
So if you think about that, that means that there's no sacrifice here. Like, if you eat vegetables, you're pretty good. It's really an amazing statement. So I wish people could if you tell people to just take away 2 or 3 things, you think you done shot them. It's not that serious. Especially when you think about the time you have with your family. I'm sitting here with my father-in-law, and I have time with him. And we've been working, it's like, it's late. It's almost 8:00. I've been in my building where I work since 6 a.m. I still have energy because I'm not putting poison in my body. I still have mental clarity because I'm not putting poison in my body. And guess what? This is an exercise night. So even after we finish this, I'm going to spend a few minutes doing some exercise. That's how you take your car, which is your body, get it out of the garage, put the best gasoline in it. And if you treat your body like a sports car, it'll run like a sports car. So, and I do appreciate you, Doc, because you have inspired me. That's why I was so proud to get in the documentaries. I said, I'm like Dr. Mason now, it's like I'm crossed over, So I'm really excited that you've inspired us. And I really want the entire community, the people that you respect and follow, the Dr. Ornishes of the world, and the people I follow, like the Dr. Eric Westmans of the world, I want them to be able to sit down and have a conversation. And we should be able to talk, about this science in a way that allows us to focus on the people we're serving, not on our individual agendas. And I just love the fact that we're on a platform where we can do that.
Yeah, and we can disagree without being disagreeable.
Exactly.
And the fact of the matter is, there is not much money for the research of the kind that we're talking about. Because if it's not about examining a single agent that'll end up in a pill or something, there's not a lot of money for this. And food doesn't work that way. You can't break away one small little pathway in a food and test it and say, this is it. Like, that's what they do. That's what pharmaceuticals do every single day. You don't know that a lot of the medications, especially some of the anti-cancer drugs, are made from plants.
Right.
They're plant derivatives. But you don't know that because you're spending the $10,000 for each of those infusions, and you don't know where it came from. They don't tell you where it comes from.
Right.
So what we are trying to do on this show is bring you that kind of intellectual balance, because we've been so misled by people have as a value proposition to mislead us into consuming what they want us to consume.
Yeah, but I would love to hear from our colleagues, Dr. Miller or Dr. Graham. What, how do you guys feel about this conversation?
Yeah, I just like to congratulate you on your presentation. And the one thing that it does, sometimes we tell people, what we think is the best thing for them to do, and if they can't do the whole thing, sometimes they get frustrated and just totally turn away. And so I think you also offer them an opportunity to eat healthy, even though you may enjoy things other than just plants. And so you said it's okay, but be careful and follow a particular format so that you're not doing things that harm you. And I think that's going to be helpful to those who just can't pull away completely from what they've been doing all of their lives in terms of the food, but maybe be able to do it in a more healthier way. And so I think I think the presentation was excellent, and obviously the subject matter is really of ultimate importance in terms of when we're talking about healthcare, and it's we talk about we see all these commercials about different kinds of medications and things like that people we can help you with this particular illness and this particular problem, not realizing that many of these things wouldn't be there if we were eating better in the first place. And so I think that we really do have to get to the heart of the matter and begin to deal with the building blocks, the blocks that build you into into diabetes, and eliminate some of those things, and then we don't have to worry as much about some of the other things. So I congratulate you on a great presentation.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question. I've always had a great deal of bread in my diet. I like bread. I grew up eating bread, all kind of bread, whole cake, cornbread, bread. How do I transition kind of away from that? I mean, I'd like to have a little shot of milk and bread every once in a while. Cornbread, crumble it up. Not every week, but every once in a while, I get a taste. I actually asked my wife the other day if the next time she go to the store, if she could bring me a little thing of buttermilk, because I get a little bit of that. Does it hurt? Like every once in a while,
Yeah, you can absolutely I write columns for the Diet Doctor, and if you go to the Diet Doctor website, they're like the #1 low carb website on the planet, and they have recipes for bread, but they don't use flour. They may use flour, but it's almond flour, and it has things like the fiber that So it's got the fiber in it, it's got the almond flour, and by the time you finish with the bread that they show you how to make, your carb number may be 3, as opposed to 25 to 35 for just one like muffin or maybe 2 pieces of bread. So the first thing is that there are many alternatives, and I think they're important. I remember having a podcast guest. His name is Vic. I found him on Twitter, and he actually makes a It's only in Canada, unfortunately, but he makes a pizza crust, but they use coconut flour for the pizza crust. And it just, so what I'm saying is there are things you can do because the coconut and the almond are way better for you than the wheat flour. So part of it is to transition with those alternatives. And I don't think you should deprive yourself to the extent that you don't do any of that unless you have an addiction, a processed food addiction. People who have addictions, you wouldn't want them to have their addiction available to them because you may not know how to say no. If you can have nuts on the counter and only grab a handful once a day, you're good. But if you can't not do that, then you need not have the nuts on the counter or in the house. So that's how you mitigate that. And I think for many people who are transitioning and they're trying either low carb or low fat, they have to have some of the familiar things, maybe in a different form, that allows them to continue with some of that. Now, I'm at a point now where I don't have to have a low carb cake or anything, but when my kids are visiting, they will make a cheesecake that doesn't really require sugar or flour. They may use, one of those more natural sugar, like a stevia or a monk fruit, to flavor it, which are forms of sugar. So that's how you deal with it. And again, it goes back to meeting people where they are. And I need to make sure that the people in front of me, that I walk with them, and then we take baby steps. Some people go crazy and just do everything, and they just completely eliminate, they clean out the pantry. But most people need to take baby steps. Once you adapt, though, as I suggested in me, I don't even miss it anymore. I just don't. Once you get rid of your drug and your addiction and you go through withdrawal and we call it keto flu or a carb withdrawal. Once you go through that, you don't really miss it anymore. You will miss it if it's in front of you, though. So the key is don't have it in front of you, because this just happened this past weekend. My wife will laugh if she watches this. I think we went to Panera Bread. There was some old potato chips in the pantry, and it was calling Tony's name. Those chips said, "Come to me." And I struggled. I did resist it. And then sometimes you need to just eat the chips. But what I'm saying is, even a guy who teaches this stuff throughout the, YouTube podcast, I struggle too. So why would I then want to put myself in a situation where I'm going to struggle? So I tend not to bring those things to my home. And that's how I would handle that.
Well, if you were to ask Dr. Miller or Dr. Terry Mason, they would both tell you to resist the devil and he would flee from you. So I got to tell you that if you resist the devil, he will flee from you. Congressman Chad, who is with Strategic Consulting and also Zing Health, says, great discussion. Audrey says, I appreciate the presentation and everyone's perspective of the information. Mary Ballinger says, so good to be here and to benefit from all this amazing information, encouragement and knowledge for good health. Thank you all for being so awesome. Congressman, Marcy Clear also says moderation is the key. So she's saying moderation is the key. Audrey says, well, that's how they used to eat it. Cornbread and buttermilk. That's how they used to do it. James Shelby says, great presentation. Lifestyle is the key. And thank you. And Terry is here. And she, so I'm having some difficulties reading her comment on this side. Some of it came blurry and didn't come all the way through. I don't know if you can see it clearer, Dr. Hampton.
I see it. I'll be honest. I wasn't sure if the Lila June, I wasn't sure what that was. So I won't be able to comment on that. I do know her. So what I'll probably do.
Terry, we know that Terry is here. So thank you for joining
Terry,
us.
Yeah, shout out to Terry for being here. I'll probably look that up and find. I'll provide some clarity. It's not ringing a bell right now.
So Vanessa Wesley is here and she gives a great thumbs up. And Marcy Clear says, what about carbohydrates and soda?
That's almost too easy. Well, the way I tell patients, try not to drink your sugar. Just like Dr. Terry Mason said, if you're going to get some fructose, eat the fruit, right? So rather it's juice, which I discourage, or soda, it's you have 9.5 teaspoons of sugar, because you just take, and again, the formula is 38 carbs and the average 8 ounces of soda divided by 4 is 9.5 teaspoons of sugar. And it has the kind of sugar we don't like, which is fructose. And hey, we all know fructose is it's a disaster to your liver. it's more lethal than even sugar, because it's only primarily, when I say only, primarily processed in the liver, leading to fatty liver. And some people believe that a fatty liver is the root cause of a lot of chronic conditions, including diabetes and hypertension. So I would avoid soda. If you want to treat yourself every once in a while, okay, fine. But in general, that's something that you may only want to see around the house for, the 4th of July, but it shouldn't be something you consume on a regular basis, because it's literally just like pouring sugar in your mouth, and it's not. Your body deserves better. Again, I mentioned a car earlier. Treat your Jaguar, if you're in German, Jaguar in American. Treat that car like it deserves to be treated.
All right, so we got an anonymous question that says, my doctor told me not to drink diet soda either. I am a diabetic. My goal is to get off medication. I was on 4 insulin shots a day. I am now down to 2. Is diet soda just as bad as regular soda?
I'll let you comment, my brother, but I just have to speak to this.
No, go right ahead. You go right ahead, Tony.
Amen.
Because you know what I'm going to say.
I know what you're going to say. No, and I don't disagree with what you're going to say, but I'll say this. But there's a caveat to this. So when I learned from Dr. Eric Westman, who has a low carb clinic at Duke, he gives people a little leeway during their transition. So if you're transitioning, just like I mentioned earlier, he'll say, well, I prefer you do the diet soda or zero Coke or whatever, because it won't spike your sugar in most cases. Sometimes it'll still spike your sugar because your body thinks it's sugar. Then the liver says, I don't see any sugar, so I'm going to put some sugar out there anyway. And when they do studies on weight loss, people who drink diet soda gain as much weight as people. I mean, duh. So it's like, why even bother, right? But the other thing that I want to say is I don't trust all of those artificial sweeteners. They'll do these studies that say, oh, it's not that bad. Well, it's still a chemical that may increase your risk for some negative things. And I worry about cancer the most. So even if it doesn't cause you to have a sugar spike, what is it doing downstream for your health in general? So I think if you're transitioning and you need something to hold you over until your body becomes adaptive to this way of eating, that's okay. But as a general rule, that's a processed food, and I consider it garbage for the most part. Any comments in addition to that, Dr. Mays?
No,
yeah, well, I would
exactly what I was going to say.
And the other question is what is it in soda that's going to improve your health or help you? So some things, if it's if it's zero, then you really have to consider that when you're consuming food substances for your body, it should help your body. And so if it's not helping you, then that in itself is really it's not a positive or a good thing to do.
We have to understand that our basic drives have been engineered to serve industry. Mm-hmm. So our basic drive for thirst, which is really about water, has been co-opted by soft drink industries and other industries that help sort of take that basic drive and sort of move it to what moves what they want to move. So we got to be careful. We just have to be careful. And I know it's difficult. And these things are difficult because sugar has addictive qualities. Caffeine has addictive qualities. And when you mix the two of them together, you really got something going on. So I just like to say the other thing is that in terms of when we talk about plant-based, and I think you made a great point about that I just wanted to make. And that is when I talk about whole food plant-based. Not manufactured or put together stuff, but whole, just the way the plant, you don't go wrong when you're eating the plant, just the way it is. not concocted into a burger or not concocted into a hot dog or not concocted into all those things that we're trying to move away from. So I just wanted to make that real quick point, because I think that Dr. Hampton did a good job talking about these things. And we just need to understand that the industry is at work at all times, and you don't see anything that hasn't gone through a tremendous marketing analysis to find out what taste they would need to tweak in order to get more people to drink or eat these things.
And I'll say this real quick: the tobacco industry, I'm sorry, the food industry hired the people who used to work for the tobacco industry to make us addicted. Now, the cannabis people are hiring the people in the food industry to make us addicted to that. So we're in trouble. It's going to never end because it's all about the money.
It's all about the money.
So it takes me back to Dr. Terry Mason when he says, "What is cereal? What is it? What is it?" You know, Dorothy, who is a adamant viewer every Monday night, I love her so, Miss Murray. She says she is on vacation, but she is not going to miss a Monday night watching Couch Conversations. She is joining us from Australia.
Oh my!
The floods are bad here.
Yay!
The floods are bad here. But she was not going to miss her Monday night dose of Couch Conversations. So I thank her so much for being here. And as Dr. Mason was saying earlier, just how addictive, soda, the sugar is, and then the caffeine. This is going to be our last question of the evening because our time has come, and I know you hate when I say this, but Marcy says, but soda is an addiction, and withdrawals are painful. What can we do? I'm gonna sit back and drink my water and wait on y'all.
I'll just quickly, I want my colleagues to chime in. I'll just say that I did interview Joan Iflin, she has a reset community. They have 14 hours of Zoom meetings all day long. And if you have a processed food addiction, you can just search on YouTube, Dr. Tony Hampton, Dr. Joan Iflin. That'll provide support because most of this is behavioral. It's mostly psychological. But there is some real, your addictive neurons will make you want to consume these substances. So you want to make it, so it's okay to start a gradual removal from these types of substances. One of the things I drink, which is a little pricey because I don't make my own, is kombucha. It's fermented tea. You have to be careful because sometimes they'll add too much sugar. So I try to find a version. And what I like about it, it's like it has that whole acidic thing going. And it kind of reminds me of soda. So I'll probably have one of those with my late dinner tonight. So I think you can kind of transition that way. But I think you may need some help. And I think if you listen to that video where she goes through the 11 criteria for food addiction, if you meet that, you may want to join Joan Iflin's reset community as a resource, as a way to deal with this. But any other thoughts, you guys?
Well, I think any substance that one is addicted to, and obviously it's going to be painful to remove it from you. But as you said, I think that we have to start gradually and be consistent in our process of withdrawing from it. Otherwise, it's just a roller coaster, and we're going to go up and down and continue to keep ourselves in the same bad situation. So I think, you start gradually, but with a goal of discontinuation.
All right. Well, our time is here, and I know you guys hate to hear me say that, but right before we go around the table to get our thoughts until next Monday, Congressman, we got 884 comments last week in reference to your question you asked about how do you tell people that you don't want to take your mask off when you are taking a photo. So there were 884 thoughts that people wanted to help you out with. I'm just going to read the top 3. Of course, we got one that night that says, as you were taking your mask off, begin to cough, and they will not ask you to take that mask off. The next person says, number 10 says, Tell them you're just getting over something and you don't want to give them anything. And then number 150 says, I just randomly picked these numbers. Number 150 says, and her name is Karen. Karen says, simply tell them Miss Rona is still here. She is not gone. I'm saving you and me. So we want to thank you guys, and there are more comments coming in right now. So we want to thank you guys for your comments. No, I did not have a chance to go through all 884 of your comments, but I did breeze through and look at some of them. And that's why I picked some of the numbers kind of randomly. Want to say hey to Sister Leeks, Miss Leeks that's here, and she says thank you for this valuable conversation. It's very informative and all the information. So we're going to go around the table. Doug, your thoughts until next Monday.
Well, I first want to give a shout out to Dr. Hampton. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed and how much I learned from his talk. I couldn't help but think how many people I could have helped in my practice if I'd heard that at the very beginning instead of after I retired. And the only thing that I would add to that is that if you have one of those diseases like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, try the Mediterranean diet. It might help.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, outstanding. Dr. James Miller.
Again, Dr. Hampton presented some valuable information to us tonight. And my advice is, hey, heed and listen to and study the information that he presented and follow it. I think it's going to be it's going to improve your health.
Outstanding. Our chef extraordinaire, Dr. Tony Hampton, and right before you give your until next Monday, we have 132 people who are asking if you can put back up the slide or put it in the comments of what food they actually should eat.
Okay.
So I think I missed that slide when you put it up, but it's a lot of people saying you have one up there. So if you have that slide, if you can just drop that in the chat, that would be great. Go right ahead with your until next Monday.
All right. Well, I'll definitely do that. I mentioned the link tree, and that's just a fancy way for me to get all my links in one place. When I'm in a clinic with patients, it is absolutely a challenge to, in 15 minutes, share everything that needs to be shared. So when you go to the link tree, you'll be able to see the handout. I think it's the second or third option. I just shared it, and you will have access to it whenever you need to. And again, watch the video if you're interested in low carb. I feel relieved. I was a little nervous about, having this conversation. I had Dr. Terry Mason on my podcast. I'm probably one of the few low carb influencers who is comfortable having people who are vegan, vegetarian, because I think we have to bridge this gap that we have. So I really want to thank the Congressman, Nikki, Dr. Pete, and my fellow hosts for just the opportunity to have a panel with people with slightly different perspectives, although we all have the same goal. I do want to say this: if you're interested in metabolic health, in other words, you're concerned about dementia, you're concerned about cancer, you're concerned about hypertension, diabetes, your lipids are not right, and of course, heart disease and stroke, you will have healing, as Dr. Graham has suggested. If he only knew back then, if he only knew. And in my training in nutrition and functional medicine has also taught me that a lot of the autoimmune conditions that Dr. Graham had to deal with are caused because you have a gut that's not functioning properly. They call it a leaky gut. And some of these things are preventable. Maybe if we didn't get as many antibiotics when we were kids, maybe we wouldn't be predisposed to these things. But we can heal from any health condition if only we would use lifestyle. So I'm just so thankful that the American Heart Association has finally stated with clarity that we need to use lifestyle, not just medicines, procedures, and surgeries as a way to heal. So thanks again for the opportunity, guys, and let's keep doing this great work.
Outstanding. And to Pat Easley, who sent in the question, explain to us why obesity is a leading cause of COVID death, but they aren't pushing exercise and diet like vaccines. This whole show was to actually answer a ton of your questions that you sent in. So thank you for sending your questions. And I want to make sure that you heard us tonight And since you sent me a message telling me don't forget to mention that you sent it, there you go, Pat Ray Easley. We love you and thank you for sending your questions and your great questions that you always send. As always, before we leave, we want to remind you of just a few things. We want to remind you that Ms. Rona is still here. That's the coronavirus, COVID-19. So remember to wash your hands. They never told you not to wash your hands. They did tell you you can relax with taking your mask off a little bit. I don't know if I agree, so I don't believe I'll be doing that. But they didn't. They never told you don't wash those hands. So remember to wash your hands and don't forget, as Dr. Maya would say, get in here and make sure those hands are washed. And they never told you not to stop social distancing. So pay attention to that just as well. Nellie King wants to say thank you for the valuable information. And Sister Bonnie is here and she says, I'm glad you guys are back and she's enjoying it. So before we go, as always, our closing statement will always be by our very own Congressman of the Illinois 7th Congressional District, who reminds us that in order to be wealthy, you have got to be healthy. So health is wealth. Congressman Davis. You're muted, Congressman. It's still muted. Let's see what's happening. There we go.
I've always been told that the proof of the pie is in the eating. And education is something that you do and not just something that you know. So I want to thank the group. And like everybody else, I thoroughly enjoyed Dr. Hampton's presentation. But I just think of myself. Everything begins with self, as far as I'm concerned. I used to smoke cigarettes. It's been years since I've smoked a cigarette. I used to drink a lot of soda. I ain't got to the point where I cut the diet totally loose. But every time I have one, I honestly do think about it. I mean, I think about it. I don't know if I've had a biscuit except that one Saturday at Reverend Hunter's church where they had the Simon in a long time. I mean, I can't remember when other than that time. I will often think about eating something and I'll try to figure out an alternative to it. I'm certain that I use more salt than I should. I have a hard time with not having something. I try these spice things and whatever, light salt, just whatever. But it does make me think a great deal and think a great deal. So that's value added to me because, again, everything begins with self. And if you can't lead where you don't go, you can't teach what you don't know. And so it's very valuable. And I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for providing all of us with information that not only will save us perhaps some trips to the emergency room, to the hospitals, and perhaps even extend our lives a little bit longer. And there's nothing more precious than life itself. So Thank you very much. We look forward to next week, and follow up as much as you can to this stuff that you've been told. Do the best you can. See you next week.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Yeah.